icebreakers. A contract has been awarded for the Deepwater Port known, but it covers only existing causeways and docks not dredging. Number 825. U.S. Deepwater Port awarded a contract originally phase 1 called for the causeway to be extended to phase 2 dredging and Deepwater Port paired in the plane causeway extended to phases awarded phase 1 and dredging is required to deepen channels use looking to significantly expand icebreakers expansion of Arctic facilities to maximizing availability and port projects service safety as well as military presence focus appears to be on deepening the basin army course. Solicit bits and phase 2 funding from the cities being taken away now because the project in parallel and future delays ensure future cuts line is 416. No one is 10 million and state funding creates 10 million much more port expansion comment for the automatic crews of the port unspent funds reallocate the money to pull the shovels can give up these funds if we don't have the money project in jeopardy. Icebreakers are too large to fit in the Arctic port networks. 810 turbo car for icebreakers being included almost 9 billion to build ships. Icebreakers are too large to fit in the ports north of the Aleutian Islands. We have to move faster, but work has to be done to build short infrastructure. Icebreakers are useless absent a deepwater port incidental. 19. The benefits of new icebreaker capability and new carbon funding infrastructure use capabilities not markedly improving icebreakers finance and not follow by deep drop port use not identified means of helping Arctic to move oversized. Adding icebreakers allows the use to establish robust operating presence, expanding the port and numbers of deep dive vessels to provide a much needed facility for icebreakers. Navy ships cargo for energy and LED carriers provide security for forces in the port commerce. Scenario 1 is Russia. Their revisionists. One grand strategy. Their ideology leads them to seek military competition with the West Legion Russian for 25. Ideology is vocal and grand strategy method of which never confirms to security is 0 to 1 enhancing one security increases the insecurity of others. He maintains an adversarial stance for data anti-Western how security official within moons and social method that has voice most extreme opposition on military strategy. These are the method of their signals of Russia's emissions that result directly at the West. They also delineate the strategic line that strategies must follow to remain influential. Russia's nuclear strategy has evolved against an anti-Western rhetoric to more aggressive stances of the transforming into an ideology rather than a framework argument. Published a report which called for nuclear strategy of currency avoidance and nuclear weapons use as a moral strategy combines deterrence which emphasize deterrence must be guarded and credibility and willingness to use weapons and purposes to reintroduce fear of strikes on they don't escalate strikes on overseas bases. Modernization, they're building bases and nuclear weapons while increasing the complexity of graves and attacks Finland at 0625. Russia began rebuilding capabilities for status capabilities include SSBNs equivalent missiles, nuclear weapon cruise missile, Poseidon, Putin, and plans to expand ground forces. Russia invested in infrastructure development, plans civil and military functions to assert control while appearing to be harmless for militarization and enable Russia to assert sovereignty of the NSO while presenting to build up a civilian Russian Arctic hybrid activities have grown. These include intelligence collection, cybernetics, electronic warfare, information operation, physical sabotage. The objective is to remain below the threshold. Russia's uses attacks through research institutions, surveillance for our intelligence collection, cybernetics, and Arctic will take place on continuous basis. Electronic warfare has been on the Russian coast, Germany, smoking Russian engages sabotage and energy. Pipelines and subsea cables, Russian increasing use of strategy characteristics of cyber strategy. Revision is approves that U.S. Russian wars inevitable absent deterrence. Merkins 24. Arctic independently prioritize Russian field strategic competition for active Arctic strategy ensures that Arctic remains stable. Reactive strategies and inadequate. Ukraine provides evidence Moscow will challenge international norms. The citizen of Finland and Sweden offers opportunity for use to strengthen Arctic proactive Arctic strategy. Not any critics will claim assertive position and antagonist Russia. This is simply not the case. Russia has already taken steps in military Arctic by asking now the use this position to counter Russia. Use Russia war goes nuclear Monson 19. U.S. Russia nuclear war has given extinction the role would be plunged into a nuclear winter setting conducted by research from UC records in the NCAR. Research to create a model of the 15 and all nuclear war explosion to create a massive amount of smoke that cover up the Earth's atmosphere would linger for years. Walk us on lead to a drop in Earth's temperature when the season trigger changes to the monster. This already agree with previous research the inevitability of nuclear winter following a massive nuclear war. However, the Coast Guard is failing now due to lack of effective icebreakers and shore infrastructure down. 24. The Coast Guard assesses President of Arctic coastal maritime activity. Russia China Coast Guard is shooting limits for Arctic operations while unable to meet them due to asset availability challenges include lack of icebreakers, limited infrastructure, amplified asset challenges. Coast Guard uses shore infrastructure assets to support legacy estimated cost of shore infrastructure project backlog at least 2.6 billion. Coast Guard power projections also security. Their key to deterrence peak is 22. Coast Guard plays a role of deterrence as a welcome between the DoD and the DHS level mission with the same entities, private sector, maritime industry, a unique national tool welcome around the world. Coast Guard contributes to deterrence for fortifying order to ensure needs opportunities, patrols, Russia, Chinese warships, cyber frame, robust deterrence, caps all conflict. 25. One peaceful peace around the U.S. weakened Western order based safeguard against war and tyranny over the 50 minutes of prevention of catastrophic World War before 1945 conflicts were common in World War II. Deterrence is fit. Aggressors from global war is historically low. The rule of law limited the likelihood of conflict. Anti-U.S. will unravel ally new order further civil and risky revision. Society will weaken deterrence, violence, security, dilemma, arms versus anarchy prevails and countries quickly momentum not check this research painful lessons. Reducing response time in the Arctic is key. Only deep sea ports also live in 20. Let's make sure icebreakers are home ported in Alaska under 2,800 miles from the Arctic Circle, departing from the United States. Indies just to reach the various ship was devastating consequences for security and environment. Useless in to sub the Arctic. We have abundant territory. We position as capable assets in Seattle, relegating ourselves in the Arctic. Service must support within America's Arctic deepwater ports are key to effective icebreakers. Coast Guard and Navy operations both for DeSoto and 21. Arctic offshore from distance and time near deepwater port 600 nautical miles south and inland sustainable power projection ability. Host icebreakers logistics and sustainability key enables to security observation rescue environmental responsibility supply enable freedom of action port of non convergence of shipping lines that increase traffic drive responses to security requirements for deep port and sustainability strategy for Arctic security. A credible Navy present in the Arctic allows for projection elsewhere. DON 21. Credible naval forces to deter competitors respond to crises region allowing project power and other key form of deterrence creating security and reducing conflict posture must be assessed in the Arctic extinction absent a credible Navy launching less skilled 22. America's maritime superiority global imperative pure equals gross sphere influenced by sea to knowledge ability infrastructure modernized military sites building strategic missile submarines and breaks horizons taking illegal maritime space and hard military power threats versus special fracture NATO invasion of Ukraine shutter peace versus broader escalation threats of nuclear missile carrying submarines close to America's cyber attacks now could develop nuclear programs and program of violent extremist organizations including climate change pathogens competitors access tech to disrupt security AI precision weapons to more lethal proliferate particularly maritime and national defense and protect security and prosperity. The scenario 2 is offshore wind. Offshore wind is spills over to offshore projects in the global market. 25. Tech market mutually reinforcing promote offshore wind and modern techniques will be developed. Market demand increases and contributing to the global market toward offshore projects and international carbon promoted positive response. Offshore wind self-warming, key to carbon neutrality will reduce more than 1 billion tons of CO2 produces coal and gas, otherwise warming exceeds 1.5 degrees. 24. Wind energy capacity equivalent to 1.1 billion tons of the great spectrum of renewable energy to the limit warming below 1.5 assessment could reduce coal and gas generation depends on wind speed. Offshore wind cannot exist without deep water ports at solid chains. 25. Capability support assessed to support technology support infrastructure such as deep drop bursts included increasing excessive turbines make transportation less valuable. Deep water depth solar turbine components on the floating foundation turbines increasing weight. Warming causes extinction and outweighs other risk by trillion times. 19. Climate causing extinction is due to non-linearity cascading feedbacks multiplicative thresholds and tipping points. Ice clouds causes sea level rise melting increases warming carbon releases methane produces warming the adaptability limiting extinction likely moderate models is unreliable even if there's 1% probability extinction more important by trillion. Saying I might have extra time. Venezuela increases tensions once in 1-3. Maduro charged with conspiracy against the U.S. certainly high tensions between the U.S. and Russia and disadvantages are found to by ADAC works 1223. Military spending could continue push to reactivate ADAC's hold and push DOD so post have recommendation deadlines up to not yet approved by Congress being included 150 million for exploration and development of Arctic infrastructure. Military spending assessment of viable infrastructure in the Arctic region targeted language for ADAC going to be hugely strategic with the Golden Dome collapse stability now weighing 11-20. Golden Dome missile defense and Chinese Russian analysts are argued dome limited ability to target the U.S. under strategic defense reaction and impact arms resisting instability and destabilizing for sequencing and elevated 32nd strong survivability uncertain impact of strategic stability perceived instance of absolute security and constrained development of defense violates OSD increases the risk of militarization of space for presenting more aggressive break from previous position under Richard 7 indicating a new degree of hostility Kremlin views as destabilizing 32nd strike rejection of offense and defensive systems indicate U.S. seeks vulnerability with risks on arms race, war games, thump, unilateral action chant. 12-11. Facing Moscow Beijing partnership in the U.S. and Alaska conducting war games with Canada key instrument to signal strength joint maritime strength in Alaska. Certainly is exceedingly key convoluted process triggers instability. Shaw 1030. Headline is policy dynamic fuels arms racing symbolic acts of material consequences of roughly war post hardened into policy. Congress and the national security professionals must limit ambiguity. Trump's messaging strong wildly calling for denuclearization next threatening the 3-way nuclear arms race. It turns out unpredictability is dangerous factor. Stress opens up. We must help. We do not regain strategic stability through nuclear signals. And stability is a non-starter. It's a logical given status quo balances. Scope 1023. Strategic stability assumes all sides one balance. No sign that Beijing is interested. The PRC wants dominance of the Chinese are rising power. Not comfortable with the status quo. Beijing has intention for no one. Actually, strike that card. We can track subs. It takes out all of the links forward. 12.4. Maritime contract for hybrid ASW detection capabilities. Submarine tracking for dominating ops approaches. Handy for curtailing challenges. Allow seamless integration of torpedo defense for surveillance arrays. Allow Navy to classified track. Classified track.
I'll send this screenshot.
Sweet. Oh yeah, when I see this.
Can I just put in the body?
Yeah,
That's fine. It was just those two cards, right, Rebecca? Or did you read the third?
I struck the second one I read today.
Alright. Peace. You should
He
be
sent
sent.
it.
Cool. Sweet. Everyone ready to go? Perfect. Does the affirmative construct new icebreakers?
No, we think the new icebreakers are coming in the status quo. The AF creates a sense of military readiness
Okay.
by allowing those icebreakers
If Russia's
support
going to
America.
imminently escalate, how can we deter them right now?
Because the argument is that Russia will escalate in the status quo. We think that deterrence is effective because Russia sees the Arctic as like,
How do we deter
There-
Russia?
what?
How do we deter Russia?
The internal link for how we deter Russia is military readiness. Right now, if there were to be like, if Russia
What
were
is
to try to
military-
invade in the Arctic, it would take us 8 days to get up there because the nearest place that we can port our icebreakers is in Seattle.
Okay, so the
2,800
1AC
miles away.
moves our force deployments to the Arctic in order to deter them?
What?
So the 1AC moves our force deployments to the Arctic to deter Russia?
We would build a deep water port, so if we needed to put icebreakers there, we could.
Wait, so doesn't that permanently station ships there in order to deter Russia?
No,
How can you
if,
deter
if we
not
needed to keep
stationing ships?
icebreakers in the Arctic because Russia started to like attack us, we could. The AF does not fiat any movement of icebreakers.
Okay, but you've read multiple scenarios on how Coast Guard power protection solves. How can you solve with Coast Guard if you're not in the
Right,
Arctic?
because if Russia attacks us, we need to be able to project power in the Arctic. Right now, we cannot do that because we do not have ships that can like move our basic military like necessities
But
around.
you said they can move from Seattle to the Arctic. How's the affirmative delete distinctly different?
Because the affirmative is 8 days faster than the status quo.
But they are still able to access the Arctic at the same time. How does the affirmative create a meaningful difference in our deterrence posture if we're still able to turn right now in status quo?
We think that military readiness is good. That is the difference between that and the status quo. We are 2,800 miles closer to the Arctic, where Russia would attack if
Okay.
India.
Let's move on. How do we know if deterrence worked?
How do we know if deterrence works if Russia doesn't attack us?
So right now deterrence is working.
No, we are having
Wait,
arguments
you said
about.
that deterrence it only
Yes,
works
but
if
we
Russia's
have
not
read
attacking
evidence
us.
about how Russia is like building up for an attack. They are building
But
like
that's not
dual
attacking
use
us.
bases that both have civilian and military uses, which
Okay,
make
so
it
your
look like
only
they are not
so
going to
your
attack us,
only
but have.
definition for success of deterrence is based on adversarial inaction, which means the status quo solves your case.
We think that deterrence is deteriorating in the status quo. We can
Wait.
tell that because while Russia hasn't attacked us yet, they are building up to do those things.
But your definition
That's
of
the Van Loon evidence.
but then how is the affirmative ever able to solve for their threats if the only
Because
way
we
to
could
deter
see
is inaction?
signs in Russia, like, that they are de-escalating
see
their military
signs?
capability. Yeah, like, they would stop doing the things they're doing in the status quo, like building dual-use bases
Wait,
that
so
have
because
civilian
they're-
and military uses.
Wait, so because they're building bases in order to have like
They're doing a
increased
lot of
shipping-
other stuff besides building bases. The
Well, so
Van
your
Loon
only
evidence-
example is something that's like they're doing in order to create increased shipping security right now. How exactly is this the precept war?
They're increasing
What?
nuclear weapons, nuclear ASATs, Poseidon, missiles,
They're building
SSBNs,
bases
a lot
that
of
look like
things.
they're civilian bases, but are military bases.
Okay, sure. How does the affirmative solve for offshore wind? Rather,
Offshore
why does the
wind-
status quo
Yeah,
not?
the equipment to create offshore wind turbines in the Arctic is too big to be, like, held on a ship that is not an icebreaker, and if we send it from, like, Seattle, it takes too long and the equipment breaks
So
too
the
quick.
but affirmative is the only thing that increases offshore wind.
We would make the argument that it would not happen without the affirmative in the Arctic specifically,
Cool.
but other places, yes.
It's that.
How many? 4 in case in the order of the one you see. So deterrence, then and okay. Does everyone have it?
Yeah.
Cool. Alright, good to go. Forces Team Minerals, exploration and searching of minerals while development activities that occur following discovery. That's U.S. Code 17. Exploration means the search of minerals, development, and activities following discovery for producing minerals. Violation of APT is infrastructure development. Vote negative for limits of grounds. Infrastructure development is a perfectly broad field that links and references from core to generics. Now on to Asia Pacific counterplan. Text: The United States federal government should end all military commitments to Venezuela. The U.S. is poised to pivot to the Indo-Pacific post-Venezuela. That's IPDF 1.5. U.S. will continue building deficits in the Indo-Pacific throughout the 26th expansion of the exercise movement of 500 military activities range of exchange from the actual defensive logistics development and the cyberspace of 2026 including prevention of the Indo-Pacific alliances and partnerships. And U.S. Arctic development trades off with focus and funding in Indo-Pacific. Other Arctic nations sought deterrence. This called in 23. U.S. has not an interest in competing with Arctic interest plans and funding requirements and security benefits of the lack of interest of parallel to push the Arctic states to increase security ties and to take on more responsibilities and capabilities of states in the region that make up America's willingness to contain Russia and China at the high cost of extracting resources, transporting goods from the Arctic means that regions unlikely becoming more attractive than even if the ice retreat the icebreakers improved by 9 attempting to conquer the region. The U.S. incurred eventually get their competitors admitted the U.S. law, the U.S. and participation resources on the domains that are more important than the Arctic. And two-theory deterrence is impossible. The aft trade-off with the Indo-Pacific capabilities, including World War III and Taiwan invasion, which goes nuclear. That's Peters 24. U.S. air forces strengthened around the world. They're stubborn and bringing China to recording and search for all weapons stored in the U.S. and strong nation preventing China from dominating the Indo-Pacific and returning to Russia. Chinese invasion Taiwan and different fails China. Well, the U.S. civil war over Taiwan, the U.S. and drawn a major conflict and single Pacific cascading escalations across theaters, following the war. The third war will require prioritizing Americans, but military cannot be appropriate. The U.S. military focus on force when they are needed most, destroying region from invading Taiwan. Most Americans stop the priority. Now onto the security K. The ask liberal discourse of climate change as a national security threat ensures militarized responses to the problem. That's Shirazi and Johnson 20. Every movie turned into the high-profile Democrats refraining climate change and national security risk. This is a security solution to achieve an easy way to Democrats to trade themselves into the flag that military speaks of the climate change in the way that they always talk about the inequality and scarce quotes. As I mentioned in the game, and clearly 9-year-old imperative that adjusts the social and justice reasons in the mind that Pentagon views climate change as the risk after the primary goal is to protect the capital and the global economic order. And adversaries would never be sufficiently deterred. the goal, on to. And reject the affirmative fear-driven politics. Critical analysis of politics and security gives us new political vocabulary which articulate democracy. Activating your role as ethical educator is the only way to avert permanent warfare that's Grixis. 13. Resistance can only take place if the political is made of pathological education, consideration, the structural subjectivity to refuse violence. What is needed more than analysis of merging the military, industrial, and academic contributes to the value of creating an ultra equipped to the challenge of fundamental movement impossible to resist the normalization of war. The pedagogy becomes central to the definition of political and practice that make it meaningful, critical understanding, middle ways so it can forward action and effective investment demands will be brought by breaking a hard word of common sense. And set call. Arctic development is the latest installment of settler colonialism. Imperial states expand their extractive projects, commercialize and dispossess indigenous land as Silva. 22. So as public to make sense of the Arctic development project, the exploitation of viable debates in the Arctic are oblivious and indigenous political project, the exploration and undermining Arctic geopolitics. The Arctic is empty other than West later states of the interventions for property seizing opportunity. The Arctic resource boom is new wave. The Arctic settler colonialism projects that present continuity of colonialism instead of the conditions for development seeking the expansion of resources reserved to make them commercially represent the new wave of colonialism and enhance control over indigenous interpreters dismissing their rights. And thus the alternative rejecting the act because through an ethic of incrementality. That's Tuck and Yang 12. Decolonization of material non metaphor themselves and instantly move with the ethic of incrementality. Recognize the sovereign for decolonization, incrementality, and acknowledgement that decolonization require changing the order of the world. The goal is to break the liberal structure in the triad. Reagan not compromise, break the triad. Makes representing the lands to soften tribes, nations, abolition of slavery, and the country reforms and dismantling and imperial industrial love. The decolonization is incremental. And now, what's the Forex advantage? Humper 825 says the funding and allocate the Army Corps and is in progress now. Lioness 416 says the city's losing funding. That means contractors can still finish the poor. And icebreakers are slow. 1. Conceded icebreakers are key for deterrence. 2. Solvency starts at 23. Preferred recent evidence. Robertson 828. Our strategy hinges on construction of Florida security covers the U.S. and Canada and Finland working together to build the also the first bet began reconstruction this spring, but not delivered in at least 2030 delay. Risk is moving at a glacial pace. And 3. Russia pushed pause and expansions in Ukraine destroyed the capabilities and the posture has shifted to maintenance. At Bulge 24. Russian for protection. The Arctic will continue to adapt. The Russian will also get a large amount of its Arctic capable forces that will take some time for Russia to recapitalize its troops. That although it is argued that Russia has more Arctic military bases than the actual picture that the disparity on even edge of network with the base of the Kremlin inspiring the veins maintain infrastructure rather than seeking to expand. Can you go back to our app stuff and find that Coast Guard is losing its people every year? And 4, Russia won't escalate in the Arctic. That's Vlek 24. Russia wants low tension disability. The rest states have agreed to follow only it involves hands-on a little more than irritation. Claims that institutions with stability and cooperation in different development are located in uncontested areas that observe a long-term trend of team cooperation disputes that have been dealt with in a peaceful and a multilateral way. The cooperation approach will endure. And the naval deterrence fails and is unsustainable. That's Vaughn Hoof 21. Commanded that our military comments based on the false premise that China is not a position to gain the power as a double-edged sword when power is protected at a great distance. The U.S. forces are vulnerable as cost of the maintaining assets and increase it at asymmetrical states because more constrained overcommitment is dangerous. It is easier to deny commanded the seas to exercise it. The Pacific will remain a contested environment. The China cannot break out of the China will accept the swell and overstands for giving up a command of the seas will not be fatal. And now is the wind advantage. Warming impact is empirically denied by a geological record. That's Thorstad 23. Does not give us a reason to expect climate change to bring about catastrophe. Gives us a good reason to expect it won't bring the PMT to the world with 70 degrees above the PMT did not lead to massive change. The term rapidly rising. We haven't seen rapid rising before. Then so South Syria and Nevada and Greenland ice force has 10-degree warming. It occurred over 6 years. So to give us abundant evidence of dropping temperatures better harder than worst case scenarios that all have seen humans thrive with the technology and reforming can survive. And we will concede that deep water ports lead to more offshore wind that causes extinction. 1. Biodiversity turn. Arctic biodiversity is high now. That's Greenfeld 25. In recent years, the bounce back of wildlife and given conservation of reasons for cautious options and seals are doing well. We know that also true that other species in the North Sea. A lot of occurrences are growing practices from nations such as the new maritime direction or areas increasing control on fishing. In offshore wind development, it's catastrophic for biodiversity. Whales, birds, and numerous keystone species would be affected. That's Hogan 24. Offshore wind facilities have extended adverse impacts of oceanic ecosystem surveying and installation operation maintenance and offshore winds and structure that produce negative impacts toward the maritime environment. Installation and wind turbines are uncorrelated and significant numbers of whales as an offshore wind produce a high decibel impact of that whale. Hearing these may impact well communication, navigation on an industrial wind project could have a population level effects. Effects include extinction, mortality for the wind turbines, and significant impact associated with offshore wind decline, unraveling integrity of entire regional ecosystems. The volume of the bird killed did not depict the magnitude of damage to the successful species into the keystone species, and concede that biodiversity loss caused extinction. 2. Deforestation turn. Amazon deforestation is trending down now. That's 24. And 23. Deforestation eventually Amazon fell 50% of company ability also saw the decline of deforestation has fallen to the lowest rate since 2018. Deforestation rates went down by 70% in the first 9 months of 2023. And offshore wind causes mass deforestation. That's Hogan 24. And average industry has risen except for Amazon rainforest deforestation. Both sides increased in large quantities and unmanufactured the large turbine blades needed for offshore wind. Loss of rainforest added the increasing greenhouse gases. And Amazon rainforest collapse causes massive climate change, protecting the rainforest. Salt acting as a carbon sink. That's Bryce 23. The Amazon is the lush home to animals and need to protect our planet from climate change. So many trees the Amazon makes its own weather, stabilize regional temperatures, added the jobs, greenhouse gas and biomass years, stores that have given natural climate protection, trees down carbon dioxide and oxygen locking away. Greenhouse gas CO2 was has a warming effect. The forest phase and trees release and mass carbon forest loss really diffused all over the world. Studied and lost because the target out of region international communities the curb deforestation and return offshore wind forces fossil fuel generation to be used to balance and fluctuation increase emission. That's 23 offshore wind turbines and produce electricity that can do more when the wind doesn't blow the turbine produce no power to the grid. The fossil fuel generation that can produce 100% of our energy needs to force the cycle up and down, raise the carbon emissions quite dramatically, cuts carbon dramatically. And the U.S. Coast Guard is failing to retain recruitment numbers, which has forced closure of necessary infrastructure. That's GAO 520. U.S. Coast Guard has lost more enlisted than has recruited. Coast Guard short about 2,600 Coast Guard has fallen short of recruiting for 5 years, the last 6 fiscal years. Local recruitment and retention numbers should really close to the stations and gave us in ships and patrol boats. And go back to the card. Data from Rhode Island demonstrates the correlation between wind power and an increase in emissions. Good for us. I can. Yeah.
T minerals, if something is built that could be used for mineral extraction, is it topical?
We think that you do not mandate the purpose of identifying or extracting those minerals. Even if an action you take were to accidentally lift up some minerals, you are not doing it for the intent or purpose of doing so. That's like saying if I make a toothbrush.
Okay, so an app has to have the intent of discovering
No, we're
minerals. How do
saying
you
you
decide
can't.
what?
We're saying you can't develop a toothbrush and then dig up minerals with it. That's not how it works.
Okay, so you have to develop something that has the intent of searching for minerals. How do you know what the intent of the app is?
We think that's something that would establish saying that you should create deep water ports for the purpose of establishing.
So every
place to
plain
hunt.
text has to have for the purpose of minerals in it?
Well, no, we think that if you outline a piece of evidence that outlines the
Humper
construction of the
evidence,
deep water ports
evidence
would
says
be
that
for
in
the
order to
purpose.
build a deep water port, we
We
have to do
think that
phase
the
2,
plan
which
text
is.
does not need to say mandates, but rather your Solvency
Yeah,
Act
you said that you have
outlines
to have
that
a
there's
piece
a
of evidence
construction of
that
deep
talk
water
about
ports.
minerals. The Humper evidence talks about how to build a deep water port, you have to dredge. So you have to go to the bottom of the ocean, dig up all the rocks that are down there basically to make the
Yeah,
or
that's
literally
nice and all.
deeper. Those are
You know
minerals.
what, the facilities that we use to create anything would take minerals, but that
Okay,
doesn't mean that
the security key, do you feel like the alt,
which
or
one?
is it just rejection?
Oh,
Actually,
secured.
set call, material or not material decolonization?
We think both.
Both.
Yeah, we'll give the land back and, well, yeah, just material. Yeah, we
Do
give
you
the land back.
give the land back?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Where do you put all the people?
What?
We give the land back to them, do the people leave, in America that aren't Native Americans?
We think
We
that
think
native
they-
nations have jurisdiction.
So they have
over-
sovereignty,
Yeah, like,
okay,
if-
but the people don't leave. What's
So, for
stopping
example,
Trump from
if
ordering the military to kill all the
We
indigenous
think
people?
durable, fiat policy.
You think you can fiat out of the effect of the alt being that Trump flashes out?
Oh. Why, if you read a piece of evidence that says specifically giving back the land would cause Trump to
Okay,
get
the
so angry.
biodiversity turn,
We
the
would fiat that,
deforestation one, how do you think that why is offshore wind the largest internal link to deforestation?
We think, we're not gonna, we don't claim that it is, we think that
Okay,
it
so
definitely does that.
when people want a bunch of paper and they cut down a bunch of trees in the Amazon to do
You
that,
can't
why
come-
is
you
the
can't come
app?
up here and say that
unique cause of
people
deforestation?
cutting down trees is also something that's bad, but then say that makes offshore wind good. We think that it is a large link to deforestation, which is net.
Okay. The biodiversity turn.
Yeah.
Offshore wind development is happening in other places in the world, just not in the Arctic. Why is the Arctic specifically going to cause the biodiversity collapse, or the deforestation collapse for that matter?
We think specifically that doing in the Arctic opens up large populations that have been otherwise unaffected by things
Why
like
are those
offshore
populations
wind.
key to global biodiversity? What piece of evidence says that?
If you come up here and say that Arctic biodiversity is not necessary, we'll read some of that.
You don't remember.
I think he left the time up there. Oh, right, time.
Just don't remember.
card's also on the email chain.
Cool. Yeah, other stuff.
Here, okay. And 154 used. I forgot what the coffee thing. Yeah, it should be sent. For the order, it's gonna go advantage 1 deterrence.
Did you write down the prep time?
Yeah,
154
154
used.
Okay.
So it's gonna go advantage 1 deterrence, then offshore winds, then it's gonna go team minerals, the counterplan, actually the security K, set call, then the Asia Pacific counterplan. Or, yeah, I think that's it. Does everyone have it?
What is wrong with the Humber evidence is specific on how there's 2 phases of plans. First is phase 1A, which has been passed, but phase 2 is what the afternoons with actual dredging of the port, which is not happening yet. That's what the Humber evidence says. 1T2 is what the line notice evidence. It's talking about $10 million that the state has to pay to the contractors that action happened, which have been taken away, which is conceded. So you know that whatever they're saying is wrong. Then 1T3, they say you can see the icebreaker stuff solves deterrence. That's wrong. It's talking about the Coast Guard specifically solving deterrence. That's the PK's evidence. 1T4, they say is take solvency 2030. The card is new. Doesn't assume for recent developments how we bought 20 new icebreakers from Finland, and we literally built a new order for 6 new contracts for new icebreakers coming right now. And the OBB increasing shipbuilding. 1T5, they say Russia doesn't escalate. This is wrong. They conceded revisionism. Most of revisionism warrants, which I'll extend right now. 1, modernization. They're upgrading their icebreaker fleet. Nuclear subs, missile capable to Poseidon has allocated 160 million to defense. 2, ideology. They believe security is 0-7 forward hawkish positions against anyone advancing anti-Western rhetoric. And 3, gray zones. They do intelligence collection, cyber attacks, electronic warfare. And 4, Putin. He believes he's winning the war in Ukraine and will lash out. And 5, dual use disguising military infrastructure civilian to gain an advantage while appearing defensive. That's the Zoom, Robinson, and Van Loon evidence. And you know for facts that they can see the ideology of this. Their evidence are propaganda for Russia, so you reject it off your flow. And that explains why Russia's escalating right now. Cross-apply that to the 1T5 about how they're escalating. And I'm pretty sure they conceded the Navy stuff. And in effect,
active Navy acts as an impact filter. Climate change, gray zones, pathogens, illegal sea claims, and nuclear programs all go existential without the Navy. That's gilding. And DON evidence that they conceded robust deterrence caps every conflict. That's the key evidence. It acts as safeguard, dissuading enemies from starting conflicts in the first place. But, before 1945. And before 1945, empirics group, that's key evidence. And a war in Russia caused extinction. Absent deterrence, nuclear war in Russia caused extinction. The explosions from dissuading enemies from starting. The next goes offshore winds. 121 is wrong. There is an impact to warming. There is an impact to warming. I'll extend the neg evidence, NG evidence. So talking about one, emissions. Warming creates increase in carbon methane that makes further runaway warming. 2, values, there's not linear cascading feedback to some multi-tipping points like sea level rise from ice caps. 3, adaptation. You can't adapt extinction. Likely models are unreliable. Extinction probably will be more. That's the NG evidence. And next, group this like big turn section together. I'll go down in a list. Biodiversity loss is done by hundreds of years. In offshore wind, solids, biodiversity, fisheries, turbines create artificial reefs. Whales are finding increase new habitats for fish or reducing noise that would kill them. This by net better described in 624. Philosophy is offshore wind is harmful to whales and life. Noise can be mitigated. No evidence noise from turbines cause negative impacts mortality for whales. Intake limits to the final environment. Impact statement from OEM found vessel strikes out like an offshore wind turbine may function as artificial reef, creating new habitats. Artificial offshore oil and gas harms marine life. Also kill millions of carbon dioxide inhabits shellfish, coral corals from development, maintaining calcium carbonate, and even completely unchecked deforestation takes 200 years and will cause extinction of box 16.3 trillion trees from 50 million are cut down each year. Take over 200 years for forests disappear. The center is unlikely that would be more conservation of a tree free planet. The environment would not be devoid of oxygen. We can start 4,000 years before oxygen right after that's not considering the photosynthetic abundance of carbon dioxide which will freeze oxygen levels and no environment extinction. Health at 22. This is all matter for biology, spatial heredity, and lack of strong continental economy includes small changes that like global scale high. While taking points many regions biology intact to less than 90% rich countries are scored below the planetary boundary. The strong evidence complete destruction of ecosystems like destruction. Typical points in England forest cover 2% and the open in England experience non-nuclear ecological jobs ag increase or inhabiting or complete destruction will make an increase despite declines in ecosystems shown and no impact to deforestation that's goes offshore when 19 the lung claims that the dust left behind the Amazon uses the same amount of oxygen and even restoration so it's a wash. Amazon reduced oxygen zone farms it's got a pasture 80% the market 80% and we access the same terminal from deforestation. The app solves climate change by using offshore winds. That's the shed evidence which when conceded and the app combines offshore winds with high DS to create sustainable reliable energy storage. Their evidence moves on. They read fossil fuel on that.
Never mind.
Their evidence assumes a method of storage that uses fossil fuels, not the absolute 25. Energy storage is the key of offshore wind renewable energy. Involves both electric hydrogen production, fuel cell generation, efficiency of renewable energies, improve the stability of overall system, enables reliable energy dispatch. Next, two minerals. What do we mean? A, function the averages built aboard the use of materials and construction that's slow. B, tax rates the most objective metric. Anything that misses burden. 2, the attribution value. It does have the intent to define development and exploration holistically. How this defining the context of mineral policy. B, effective for the purpose of requires determine the intent of the firm and not the mandate. 3, its development is a federal activity including the planning, construction modification, removal structures, and use of resource funding for development is defined as an activity including construction modification, removal structures, and acquisition, utilization, and disposal of resources. Give the next slide. 5. Prefer A, ground. The follows whose environment is about extraction, B, predictability, the most contextual definition, one distinction for the topic. C, over limiting. The for codes and how education already policy factors outside middle charge ID functional check Alaska Camelot argument cap K Russia China D approved. Otherwise like significantly check F reasonable is good enough competing against class race money position are otherwise losing substance next is security K. When evaluate the desirable planets have the uniqueness alternative salty Avery and the same model as a negative move money see often defense accuracy to play the game and so you just get around really two no substitution of A concept rotation between the case before but haven't changed our arguments are going to be all cause family friends religion object factors 3 permanent what's double 4 permanent to the Afghan mutual exclusive parts of the law and African engagement that benefit 5 proof conduct voter valid self dependency of the firm by green line blockchain as a reason we get a several reps because they did 6 voting picks our voter they kill fairness by stealing the target money see create lane picking the base that favors the neg and securitization doesn't automatically justify emergency actions if so it's not unique to 24 most security banks should reanalyze reveals responsive threats reaching back the theory denies whose audience consistent security defensive conventional boundary security movement and followed by an exception response contradicts exception of security decision making sovereign bodies are able to scrutinize the executive process transfer. A, no link into all fields Russian real threat. A, Russia's increasing complexity and frequency of great factors focused on limiting U.S. information novels. B, Russia's modernizing nuclear capabilities. And just crossify what I did about one case about how the revisionist. And E, even if the what he sees really makes Russia real threat, it doesn't matter because we determine. And the theory for how international relations work is wrong. Realism is true for both America and Russia in the Arctic Winds 24. The use strategies rooted in national interests and seeing the Arctic as a new safe strategic theater for competition, national defense and security, and commercial scientific advancement are listed for the list of the DoD military contents from and through the Arctic. The use of given more attention to relation to Russian security, the interests have been prominent in our Arctic, American Arctic strategies and market there, and the links invert the error by marginalizing traditional security issues in the article of Luxembourg and during 20. Scholarship, the Arctic is a complexity with Arctic is simply explained by the conventional realist theories about these calculations are create sense of vulnerability and suggesting that determine the defense inherently undermines the next set goal. Cross supply, for making no subjectivity shift. The all three perm develops double either they will come off af or inevitably fails. Yeah, and cross by the perms. And 5 per fronts of whatever valid is affinity of the firm relay and proxy. 6 all disorder Russia. Russia winning means so inflicting incomparable racial violence. That turns again all in 15. Contemporary Russia is extreme nationalist and makes Russia the most violent country for racial minorities far outstripping the next most dangerous racial groups life in Russia and form of social perpetuity. Low racist violence for 1 year in Russia is higher than the entire negative sense now capture quality data which reveal systematic nature of Russian violence. Russia has violently rejected immigration extremism rallying on rationalized fear. Russia was definitely the world's wide future and all fails can't overcome Trump. He'll demonize indigenous people, refuse to decolonize because it result in violence against indigenous people and no impact of biodiversity loss at all causes other countries and climate change are all like tragedy, bottom or beats thought by hundreds of years. See war with actual kill the environment, everything else cross supply on case of the biodiversity impact defense. Annex Asia pivot. One, perm do both and shields linked to that benefit because we're using resources we're using for Venezuela can be used in the Pacific. This is and this that is a joke. The U.S. is focused on Asia. We just captured Maduro and Venezuela. And even if there's a unique conflict, still access number 1 passengers on the DA aspect. We passed between 40 plus icebergs going B, O, B, and C, Finland, D, deployment. We've done past deployments, and he's stuck by $100 million, spending on ATAC, and it's stuck by Arctic deployments, 625. So just drone Arctic Circle defenders engaged in the drone simulating threats market there, and it's dumped by capacity constraints. 1 C, Peter 24, U.S. force restriction, design, ready intelligence, recruiting shortfalls, weapon shortages, maintaining the backlogs of modernization, and 2, the new IS national security. Arctic deterrence solves the Indo-Pacific region. 24, Arctic is a key for U.S. for protecting its local determine the outcome of any conflict in the Indo-Pacific articles of any critical infrastructure. Indo-Pacific capabilities should regional conflict be expanded. The use can deploy deployment capabilities to the Indo-Pacific. Market again. Indo-Pacific.
Arctic.
Yeah, hold on, let me get that right. Yeah, I'm good.
You read, so on the icebreakers deployments on the HBODIS app, you said that we have deployed icebreakers before. It literally says 2, the only ones we have.
Yeah.
How is that, like, how's that even remotely comparable to the AF?
Yeah.
So is the AF also 2?
I never said that. So what we're saying is that we've done past the icebreaker deployments, which should have triggered the link. If the app passes a build, that should not be viewed small enough to cause that big of a change. If we've passed, like, we've done a build, China should not, like, we will not view that as
We also
big as
bought like 60.
and we bought like
Okay,
60
yeah, so you
icebreakers.
have to build ports now.
I'm confused. What do you mean?
You have to build deep water ports. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Okay, yeah, so how is that not a shift from focus in the status quo?
yeah, the app. Yeah, I'll explain how the app works. The app basically, there's 2 phases of the plan. We passed phase 2, which is the build of basically dredging of the deep water port. The app passes the build of deep water port and up. That's what it does.
Okay, yeah, so you're
We
sending a
don't
signal
construct-
that the United
deep water
States is
port is
actually
being
going to shift
constructed-
focus
Yeah.
for
Argument is
establishing
that we're already
military
focused on the
infrastructure in
Arctic.
Arctic, right?
We're focused on the Arctic right now. That's our
How?
And if we're not, we're focused
Because
on
we, because the, like,
We've done
the
okay,
BBB was
Arctic
like, give us some
deployments.
icebreakers?
We've done engaged drone simulating threats, 16 warships, aircrafts, ground units.
So
That's the other card.
so
sets.
you said that we have passed
we've
a
done-
bill that allocates funding to buy icebreakers. How many icebreakers have you bought?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're increasing. We're
How
going
many
40 from
icebreakers
Finland.
have you bought?
Yeah, we bought 20 from Finland. We passed the ice.
Why are
pack,
they not
which
in the
equals
Arctic?
40. I'm confused. We haven't. Yeah, because we don't have an area to send them. We need a deep
Yeah,
water port, which
so we
allows
have
for
to
sustainable
build
power
deep water
protection.
ports
That's the
now.
biggest evidence.
How's that not a massive investment into infrastructure that is
They
not
invest-
invested in the Arctic?
The OBBB also spent $115 million on ADAC. That also sounds to our argument.
Okay, sure. Let's go down to the impact defense. You said that specifically Arctic deterrence solves the Indo-Pacific because apparently protecting the focal point determines the outcome of any conflict in the Indo-Pacific. Why?
Yeah, it talks about how the Arctic is a focal point, can determine it. Because
It
if
says it holds critical infrastructure. What critical infrastructure? I thought we don't have any. That's
Well,
why
yeah.
we can't deploy icebreakers, right?
Wait, so can you repeat it? So, like,
The reason why it's a focal point is because that's critical infrastructure. What critical infrastructure?
yeah, it's a good. Yeah, we're able. Yeah, it's hard. It's talking about how we can. How this critical infrastructure of the Arctic that should
North
be there,
American
which
Arctic
allows for
holds
deterrence of
critical
the Arctic,
defense
which
infrastructure
allows
for the U.S. and its
focus.
allies and partners, including long-range
The card is
Central
talking
for
about
domain
how-
awareness.
The card is talking about how us in the Arctic allows for us to deploy troops
in the
So
Indo-Pacific
if
because
we
we'd be able to
build
deter
infrastructure
Russia.
in the Arctic,
I can
but
explain it.
move our
So,
Navy and
if
Coast
we're-
Guard into the Arctic, we can have more Navy and Coast
we
Guard
might-
in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, first, the
It
Navy.
makes China less sure that they will be able to defend everywhere.
If we have less Navy
The
and
Navy,
Coast
yeah.
Guard in the Indo-Pacific,
Yeah, we literally read evidence on case about this. One, the DON evidence talks about how the Navy being in the Arctic allows for them to focus everywhere else because it'll be centralized.
8 minutes. Starting now. It's sent. 311 left. It's gonna be the security K, then the settler or colonialism critique, then advantage 1, then advantage 2. I'm gonna go get some water. Let that down.
You said security set call for or indicates, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Everyone ready to go?
I'm downloading it.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm in.
Cool.
First on security, concede the perm, but a drop to climate change link cross-applied adaptation uses the impact beacons here aren't going to be able to solve for climate change because they default to a militarized response, which means that it's based on security logic. It's designed to protect the US-led order, not actually solve for climate change. That's why your democratic politicians advocate for policies that aren't able to adequately solve for the climate change in order to protect US interests rather than any climate change. The affirmative has no mechanism of solvency because it's entrapped in the state. It's more focused on precipitating instead of anything else. Exactly. First argument they make is framework, but we're on a balanced way to rhetoric and representations of the apps research part of forwarding consequences for one, the whitewashing this and scholarships, colonial policies, also colonial students that have been under the guise of the United States, the best perpetuating manifest destiny. Two, the discourse of violence, the interrogating rhetoric is key to motivators accountable, anything else locks and violence, those who are breeding ground for colonialism, free neg ground. Over in terms of activate negative prospects and loosen firm confined to colonialism, like the politics, DA, and Arctic constancy, with no critical ground resolve our offense, and they say fairness, but no link to the way to want us to do in your foundations and representations are good, and two, it disappear, you face your offers at geos within, and then the next argument, they say is extinction that ways, but it doesn't reject any instance of indigenous violence. One, ethics reject any instance of racism and colonialism, human versus segregation or slavery, good even solve extinction or the after same standard. Two, back burner, extinction that ways, silence discussion of indigenous violence means the violence of colonialism becomes inevitable, free conjunctive fallacy. Each internal link advantage means the entire probability less likely. Four, cognitive violence means to overestimate their impacts of Cohen and Elia. 10, cognitive psychology such as just probabilities human cases of following fears, some risks such as economic, mental, and environmental catastrophe, terrorist, plane crash, emotional reaction, anxiety, and error may result in probability neglect, transit into sector reaction affecting policymakers with low harm, such as graphic, more widespread when the middle ones control people reacting accelerated to risk when it probably was 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million. And 5, debate is bad for risk calculus, take over 2.2, assuming risk and impacts are higher than the acceleration, correct for that. By assuming extinction low impacts are improbable. The next argument they make is the term proper, but one links are negated 2 to F, causes attention means only be further to organize, only more violence and dissimulation free. Interest state control means all testify hard to give people's true self-determination for autopsy. Moves questions since deconstruction, neocolonial structure solves the app on the link debate proper. For the first link is the extended Civil 25 development is rooted in colonialistic logic. They don't negate this, which means they only refer to colonial support, but specifically expansion of ports, facilities, tourism, commodifying each livelihoods of river cultural race, that's case 23. There's a place of part of big, there are some changes in the deep water port will accommodate large flow for passengers. The effectiveness towards investment traffic on the environment will allow Alaska natives and nonsense of first citizens, the prospect of no walking or tourists, bobbers citizens, and no proofs that deep water ports displaced in species in 23. Most recent reports onto the beach and impact native southern ports, construction of displaced area just moves to hunting or fishing, expansion of ports for development, for the sake of development, and this means that it's affirmative causes native people to starve by displacing the populations and the food systems in daily order to exist right now in the status quo, and only furthering the commodification of agriculture via increased transit in the area. You only to Arkansas by giving them back the land in order to have true self-determination over their things, over their affairs in a way that and avoid cultural assimilation. Next argument they make is that that we engage on performance contradiction. But first we say that they haven't identified how we contradict. So doing two. Next is simulation testing. This means that we only need to we disprove the 1AC from within the fallacies of the 1AC. So even if you believe that extinction does come first, we're only disproving that from within the fallacy. Next, reject the argument, not the team, and free negation theory. Our only job is to negate the affirmative, which means that we have to provide a resolution burden in that, and then classify that to percon on the security K. Next argument, makes that Russia is racist in that terms, but what about it in the plans, representing and rhetoric and consequences are violent and cloning that's unethical part of any question of solvency. Netted to no fill in microstates, Christians, and successful the Philippines and British decolonization proof and free, turn, and it's to protect more frequently the intellectual framework for neoliberal institutions to fit by giving these communities a states. A UN is more effectively able to effectively protect when you're subordinating to American governance. And 4 links prove that app is working in a hypothetical state. Fill in. Next, they said app all can't overcome Trump. We're going to do the audit extension right now. Yes, it can. The audit is decolonization for the ethically transmitted. This means that we give repatriate everywhere where there's native land and we occupy on indigenous land in order to give them back the ability to truly govern their own affairs. It's able to solve for 100% that by giving them self-determination and rejecting infrastructure developments like the ports. They haven't read any of our DCIs on here. They only stated that we can't overcome Trump. But first off, yes, we can. Durable means that we get to overcome every Trump thing. That's every single affirmative in outside sides proof, because they can overcome and pass policies that will never get passed in real life, but independently they're ever solved. Then they say there's all causes war solved. Then war turns for bio. We're not going for a bio impact. We're going for the impact of cultural assimilation and the degradation of indigenous communities. Again, it's one of the terms. First, extended inherency argument, the court's going along just fine. Their own evidence proves we're inserting this. Humphrey 825 says that 1B, the Army Corps expects to solicit bids for phase 2B in May 2026 to be followed by phase 1B 2028 and the final phase in 2030. This means that the bids are going on right now, so even if the money, the cuts are irrelevant because their own evidence post-states evidence that talks about cuts, which means that in the status quo, the people believe that the port is going to be built right now, so the affirmative does not have a it would solve, and the status quo solves 100% of the vote neg on presumption. They have not identified a problem that they're able to solve. Next is revisionism in the debate. First of Russia is defensive. Extended Volga 24, they're shifted to a defensive posture, and even to when it comes to overreaching, such as what they're doing on these arguments, Russia pursues a rule-based order in the Arctic as Peterson in 1724. But Moscow may regard the LIOs of favorable showing support for Russia's order in the Arctic. Legal concepts saying easy, put unmatchable, and exclusively in Russian hands, allows to come and regulate shipping, sovereign, with political from writing by Russia, but its very existence playing defining what particular forms. The Arctic Council and the Arctic 5 stewardship played by sovereignty arrangements into issues such as research and rescue, and proliferation. And their order warrants are extended for the 1AC cards, but first off, we're going to answer the Lucian Russian evidence. Russia's grand strategy based on zero-sum strategy games, which means the only scenario for war is 1AC and NATO expansion. And the groups of 1AC analysts are relevant for prudence to influence bilateral dialogue and our defense is answers ideology. That's for 1AC Lucian and Rothschild card. Underscores the importance of maintaining open and effective communication with Washington. This approach is not suicidal. It's designed to prevent conflict of all advocated adhering to the rules of commission conflict with hawkish moderate groups, reaction approach to analytical bias, and answer to Van Loon et al. At 625. 1 modern station does not signal imminent war. 2 modern station started in 2002. 18 years flumps escalation. 3 Van Loon is bought and paid defense to comments to pay Russia as a threat. That's claiming that 24 we have the sources 40s offered for their offer, which means you should be very skeptical of any offer because they're trying to play things up right now in status quo. And order of answers, order warrants, the only everything they have is gray zones cause lash out, but gray zones is not only fought by the status quo and further escalation, which means they're not doing that, but we already proven that they're committed to orders, and the gray zones, their escalations are in Europe, not the Arctic theater, so that doesn't apply. Same for dual use, it's not, it's clandestine to Arctic, so we can prove that there are revisions in the Arctic specifically because they're not going to be able to do that. Next argument, it makes that, this means that there's no offense on other things. The realism stuff means they won't escalate because Russia's a defensive realist, that's Phillips 20.5. Russia considers only escalation and encroachment proceeds with efforts and integrates and extraterritorial threat actions are all about preventing the internet of defensive move Western areas as imperialistic acres of welcome a self-fulfilling prophecy portrayal is misleading and historically inaccurate. Initial invasion was far too few to capture. No evidence support desire to reestablish Soviet empire to the city in new reality. A self-inflicted wound by failing the policy in the stage for war. And next on the Navy, this checks all their impacts because the only state they deter is Russia, and they haven't established revisionist claims to their grand revisionism impact doesn't apply. The only impact they have is Navy, but A2, AD, and hard constraints undermine Navy deterrence. That's Vanhoe 21. China's invested in inserts themselves as well as the torrents, cruise, and military missiles with China's anti-access and area denial capabilities offers a great solution to maintain command. It is too little too late. The U.S. lacks capacity for nation building, including repair, logistics, and sealage. Current naval force is strengthening straight to breaking point. Strategic diplomacy plays on the Chinese strengths if large parts of China was accepted terms. And and an extended warrants from the Vanguard 21 and asymmetrical information making it impossible to have deterrence because people care about the missiles first. Anyways, on wind, concede that biology doesn't have an impact, then extend the force at 23. Actually, extend the night 23, that's the fossil fuel card. They say that the energy store itself, that these don't exist in status quo, they don't develop by the apps, that's not a mandate, so you don't know why you're able to solve that. And this turns the scenario, but it makes it, you should, so because it means that the force of the generation switch on and off in order to switch between hydropower when there's wind and from gas burning when there isn't wind in status quo, which only causes more inefficiencies for warming. Do extra time to do.
It's the cross.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused on this like fossil fuels thing. Is the impact warming? Like, is the impact on the fossil fuels?
Oh, on the turn
Just warming?
on wind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so how does that not solve?
Yeah, we're saying that, so when you develop offshore wind technology.
I understand that, but
Okay.
if we're like doing wind energy, like if we're going to do wind energy with offshore winds, how does that not just solve the term?
Yeah, so there's not wind 100% of the time. So that means that generators have to switch from coal, fossil burning things in order to do it where there isn't wind, and then switch back to wind. So it means they have to constantly go on and off and on and off, which only causes like further
Okay.
fossil fuels. We do that because we've got evidence it is less efficient than just
Sure.
burning fossil fuels 100% of the time.
On this Humper like presumption argument, I'm confused. Where does this card say phase 2 is happening right now? Because the Lionel's evidence talks about how $10 million is taken away from NOM, which allows
Yes.
for the actual plan.
So, and
I'm
then
confused.
4 months later, you read a piece of evidence that says that phase 2 is still going away. Even if there were these cuts, you still read evidence that postdates your cuts evidence. It says that this is still going ahead and still going to happen right now. The cuts don't mean anything because the most recent evidence says that currently this project is going forward. The affirmative is not inherent in the judge to vote negative on
Okay,
presumption.
this is talking about soliciting bids. We read evidence talking about these bids won't happen, which is how the
You did
Lionel's
not.
evidence. The Lionel's evidence talks about there's $10 million away from the state, which allows for the bids to happen in the first place. It's like a prerequisite to the Army Corps of Engineers actually happening. So how are we not inherent if we like basically, if we allow for
Yeah.
this to happen?
If the Army Corps expects to solicit bids for phase 2 in May 2026, that means they still have the expectation that the project is currently going to move forward because the state is going to use sufficient funding in order to make this happen. Just because there were some limited cuts right now that this card not only postdates, it still means that the current trajectory is towards support to be built.
We can go onto the K. So is the K able to go like around like people like Trump? Do you like fiat past Trump and people like that?
We think that there are both the checks against.
So
You haven't read a Trump yet. Oh yeah, you say that the all can't
So-
overcome Trump. But
So how does the alt not overcome a deep water port? A singular deep water port doesn't overcome, but it can overcome
we think
Trump.
we think a deep water port is like bad. We've read evidence that
Your
links
evidence
towards
is talking about
happens.
multiple deep water ports. We're only talking about the deep water port now. So you're telling me
Yeah, we're saying the deep water port.
so the
in
deep
Nome
water port
that we
now
read evidence
displaces
about.
natives more than Trump is hurtful towards natives is what you're saying? So you're saying the deep water port is worse than Trump towards natives.
We think that we have proven that the affirmative causes negative repercussions for native peoples, which is the reason why the judge should vote for the negative.
Okay. If the alt, you said it yourself, the alt is strong enough to get around Trump, why is it not strong enough to go past the plan? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so we think that the plan is a bad idea. This like argument about how we need to overcome the plan is completely supported by the fact that we've already proven that the affirmative is a net bad idea, even
Even
without
if
the
it is
alt.
a net bad idea, why can't the perp solve? That does not answer the question.
Even without the alt, you shouldn't vote for the affirmative because it causes worse things for indigenous people.
I say untender term. Yeah. Like deforestation. Oh, yeah. The order is the Asia pivot this ad, and then offshore wind. Right. Even post the Venezuela operation, we are pivoting toward Asia. That was our IPDF and 1.5 edits, and that right now in the status quo, if we're engaged in the arc development, it would shift away from our focus and funding that's happening right now from our most recent evidence, and that would cause us to engage in two-thirds deterrence and cause invasion of Taiwan, which causes extinction. And Taiwan war outweighs one. The only scenario for nuclear use is that the U.S. gets drawn into conflict from a Taiwan invasion, or the Indo-Pacific tensions spiral out of control from a lack of U.S. commitment. 2. Time frame. Chinese escalation or Russian escalation and status quo actions. Furthermore, Taiwan invasion would happen immediately. China perceives the plan as a shift in the United States' focus and would attempt to seize the opportunity. And the U.S. is pivoting to Indo-Pacific. That's allowed. 1228. While U.S. China relations are allowed, they're warned the long-term trajectory probably remains irreversible. Putting on call for major U.S. military overhaul to the Pacific. That every record softening is not a signal shift in the competition approach. Focuses on the bulging of the Pacific security architecture. The shift of the fragmenting of containment. The U.S. as an island, Western Europe's traditional role prior to the Western Hemisphere and the contain China's influence in the Pacific. U.S. and Indo-Pacific command could stay intact. Minnesota focus on the Pacific theater. The U.S. pivoted to the Pacific as already U.S. strategy is hastening from the shift in the Atlantic approach in the Pacific one. And the perception of an uncritical commitment makes invasion inevitable. That's one throw. 25. Turning that to about the U.S. commitment to the perception U.S. weak U.S. political resolve to the long-term war that belongs to the narrative that Taiwan is a natural instrument. Like the U.S. perception that Washington is overly committed across the globe. As the first war arguments in China, the United States has little appetite for another conflict that turns into the Pacific should put Beijing on notes. And independently, conflict spears multiple scenarios for escalation that all end an extinction that stares and sacks 1211. There are reasons that everything how Taiwan crisis could arise, and next invasion could decide the subject of full-scale military invasion disputes that could decide the motion of a chain of events in the Taiwan should the growing instability and conflict are increasing likely that Taiwan could arise at the same time the United States is grappling with another crisis contingent to restore the church and then could change the status quo to recreate such opportunity in the future. The Taiwan crisis also is certainly involved in more rapid new recently conflict crisis to desire to achieve the quick and decide that advantage of party to resort aim to massacre and frame to strike to the counter space attacking nuclear weapons that increase the escalation turn with the United States was a decided advantage. And now answer the firms. Yes, links to the benefit. The resources for the Venezuela operation were small and were drawn from Europe and independently to their returns triggers the impact. And the answer to the thumpers, the allocation of funding for activities are not thumpers. BBB simply allowed us to buy experts, but did not signal a significant shift in U.S. focus because it did not build new infrastructure or move pre-existing military assets. And the capture of Maduro isn't a good thumper because the operation was done in minutes and the assets were used were small. A single operation does not signal a shift. Even if we were taking oil that is done by private contractors, not the federal government. Aid Act doesn't thump either. The millions of dollars spent were a drop in the bucket and did not move any Navy or the Coast Guard. And answer to USA 1. The deployments were small and once again not an indication of U.S. policy focus. Active positioning of ships in the Indo-Pacific prove. And to answer to USA 2. The Peter 2040 highlights our offense. It outlines that just last year we were stretched in, but now the U.S. is regathering itself. It's focusing the commitments toward the Indo-Pacific. The plan reverses that and brings us back to the unstable past. And now answering the turn framing issue. This is a link turn, not impact defense. Two theater deterrence is I'm gonna skip over that. They have conceded to the theater deterrence, but it's definitely causing extinction. It means that even if we are able to help deter the Arctic, that's bad and does not actually solve the Indo-Pacific because we're all gonna die anyway. Ignore the team role stuff. Let's move on to offshore.
Just read.
Okay. First, extend the Thorsat 23. We think that warming is really denied because the outline says specifically the warming has increased over 10 degrees in several different areas and that would not actually harm the populations in the region, which means that you should assume that it won't in the future. And a geological record. Humans survive rapid double-digit common shocks in Greenland, the Swift Alps, American coast, and thrive during Holocene warm periods. Humans are not first rich, populous, mobile, and capable of adaptation. We get better equipped than other. And so that's Thorsat. And tipping points are gradual, lack scientific support, and the squirrel solves tails of risk. That's weighing 23. The climate system are essentially human time scales of Earth components change over millennia. Emissions that are rough shift in the amount of circulation have that laid to rest. Frozen methane responsible for releasing a trickle over the millennia. Headlines season on worst case impacts are scheduled happens methane release in the middle of the road mitigation significant reduction of methane and progress toward the carbon greatly reduced worst case scenarios and no runaway warm. But even if no extinction, that's Thorsat. 23. Even the most outlandish warming scenarios do not pose a threat of accident. The catastrophe dieback is a washable force will expand neurostructural force during the ocean 10 degrees hotter. From about 2% of the amount of release that this will not kill us on house Earth. It's speculative that extreme conditions will not occur for all feedback is to add up to 47 degrees of rise from 100 if feedback are taken from the 2 degrees to 6. They like always need to find out additional 3 degrees and negative feedbacks check. D lane 24. Clouds reflect the radiation resulting in cooling warming. It will not lead to more evaporation, more cloud over clouds covered. Clouds that represent a control system for the Earth that keeps temperatures fluctuating with the limits. Our longest views of the runway temp increases are unlikely. And even if you think that the right about warming, they have fundamentally dropped the deforestation scenario. They have read a piece of evidence that's from 2016. You should assume that you should filter it out. You've read more recent evidence that outlines specifically if we were to do offshore wind in the status quo in the Arctic, it would cause a mass deforestation in the status quo, which is already too much because we think that the time frame is much lower than 200 years that we had, and any drop would cause climate change to cause the tipping points, which would end in extinction if they're right.
We used 154.
I've used 76.
What? Let's stop her.
221 used.
So we used 221, and we had also used 154.
Honestly, ChatGPT figured this out.
That's pathetic.
Yeah, I don't want to do
Three.
that. Are we getting to that?
45. I think.
Okay, so we used 221 and 154.
Because I had
So
you.
that's 3 minutes plus 21 seconds plus 54 seconds. 54 seconds needs 6 seconds to be minutes, and 21 minus 6 is
Because I had you at
14.
Because I had you.
So
at,
we
that's-
used 4 minutes and 14
15.
seconds. What does ChatGPT say?
Guys, we can do this. Because I have you at 221 used and 606 left,
I mean, that's the saving grace.
and 6 minus 1 is 5.
What?
Bro, I just know Zing uses ChatGPT every class.
I do not use it that
It's unfortunate. I can't get him to stop. I asked. It didn't
His
work.
blocks are definitely made by Copilot, bro.
Not Copilot, bro. Copilot's fun. Okay.
I feel like we would take
Zao,
Zane off the
bro.
team if he used AI to write splines.
8 minutes minus 1.
The order's going to be deterrents, and then offshore wind. The DCI and then the K. It should be sent. Let me know when you can see it.
Do we have 3?
What?
345 left? Yeah, that sounds about
That's what I said. Like I asked.
right. Just ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. I'm not mad.
Yeah,
Email sucks.
Can I borrow one of your timers?
Okay, where did our timer go?
Thank you.
Where'd you go?
We're never gonna find it, Zane. It's
So
okay.
that was my 4th time.
What do you mean that's your 4th timer?
That's cool.
Okay.
I don't see.
Me neither.
My email usually takes a hot second, but it has been sent, I promise.
Oh, you sent that to disclosure, Dom.
Unfortunately.
Here. I can forward that.
Wait, no, I got it.
Wait, no, I definitely did not send it
I
to
had it.
disclosure one.
I have it under the run. And these ones, sorry. Offshore wind moves over to offshore projects in Blue Martin.
That is not the card. It has, Zane
Yeah,
does.
let me send- yeah, I got
was
it. I
sent
got
to
it
the-
now. Go
It
ahead.
was, I did send it to the correct email chain.
Phenomenal.
Everyone's good then?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Is it just the one card? Alright. I thought mine wasn't.
Continuing Russian war causes extinction. Russian war causes extinction. It would black out the sun and cause the black suit, which means that we cannot grow any crops and everyone would die of mass starvation. And nuclear weapons, unfortunately, that they make these ports are fine, but the Army Corps are supposed to select this one. It's not solicited yet, which means there's always a chance the F1 happened in the status quo. There's multiple phases. Besides phase 2, the F is key to figure out all of them through. The Hubbard evidence says that even after considering lawmakers would continue to take funds and delays, which means that only durable fiat can solve it. The next argument they make is that Russia is defensive. It's wrong. Russia's real threat in the Arctic versus rhetoric 1. Putin's world review security 0. Someone thinks that enhancing one security will increase the insecurity of others. It proves that he thinks he's making the U.S. insecure by all of the modernization he's doing too. Hawkish security officials and top officials are all extremists. Medvedev, Pashkushkev, and Karganov published a report which framed the avoidance of nuclear aggression as immoral. The re-highlighting says nothing because it's about how a couple of them didn't want Putin to do that, but the fact that they're doing it anyway proves that they have a more influence over Putin in the first place. Third, internal documents have been leaked. They detail the steps to expand Russia, which they include conventional strikes on NATO and escalation of Russian overseas military bases at Luzhin and Washington. The second is modernization. There are new offensive capabilities like SSB and Poseidon. Putin's announced plans to expand Arctic ground forces, military infrastructure investment, and hybrid activities that are below the threshold that are ramping up now. Like the Van Loon evidences are all reasons that Russia is revisionist. They can say that Russia is defensive in the Arctic as much as they want, but they have to explain each one of the scenarios that Zane and I have said. The cases in which Russia has been unprovoked expanded in the Arctic. They say we should be skeptical of our evidence, be skeptical of their evidence. The ideology war was in the 2 He said that all of Russia wants to look like they are not threatening, so people will underestimate them, which is the reason that all of their evidence is written by Russians who want people to think that Russia is not threatening, which means it is Russian propaganda. They say that there's constraints on the Navy, but we're not going for the Navy, we're going for the Coast Guard. There's no fulcrum between the DoD and the DHS, and they solve deterrence through military readiness so we can have icebreakers faster in the Arctic. The K. The Navy needs link uniqueness and all solvency anything else breaks the game, makes it unfair for the app. They create a U-link use model where the negative has approved 0.1% willing to move the affirmative. It's an untenable burden that means the app will has to be perfect to win a debate. The first argument they make is ethics. One, they preclude any policy that is a perfect, ignoring consequences, free system, and imperfect world with racism and the status quo. Even if the app is colonial, the status quo can get worse for indigenous people via Trump's lash out after the all. It's a metric for your ballot is the amount of colonialism the nation risks colonialism for a deep-water board to prevent the colonialism of Trump mass murdering indigenous people. The next argument they Trump mass murdering indigenous people. The whitewashing DA is wrong for the whitewashing DA is wrong even if our education is bad at it. We still get education about other things like the United States military and the possible effects of it, which outweighs because only under fairness can you access education because if there's no fairness, people will quit. The next argument they make is the whitewashing is the discursive violence decide, which is also wrong. It doesn't sideline the discussion because preventing extinction prevents millions of indigenous people from dying, which means that it is part of the app's concern. Our rhetoric is not violent because the only way that you can decide if our rhetoric is violent is by weighing the consequences of the claim because the app could prevent worse colonialism. Nate Ground is also wrong because the Nate Ground is also wrong because they have plenty of it, and we also don't preclude Nate Ground because we should just think that we should get to weigh the app. They can still be the case. Fairness is definitely an impact because we all debate for an equitable reason because we enjoy it and because we want to get the ballot. There's no link that was explained above, and it's not fair because even with infinite prep we cannot win 100%. There is not a link to the critique, which is an untenable burden. Extinction definitely does outweigh. They preclude any. I already read that. And there's the first thing they say is conduct a fallacy. The advantage is likely that was case. Their scenario is even more outlandish because the default to magnitude-based ethics. It turns are often because war would kill all of the indigenous people. It's not put on the back burner because the app tries to prevent the mass death of all of the indigenous people. Cognitive bias is wrong because they do not have a war evidence or a war that explains it. And it's not bad for risk calculus because the detector for truth is the only way to equitably decide a debate. Anything else links to our fairness above. Anything else links to our fairness above. The extended permutation, extend the permutation, there's definitely a double bind, and it solves there's a double bind, and it solves the entirety of the all. It solves the entirety of the all. They cannot fiat pass the effect of the affirmative. We're not making the argument that Trump will prevent the all from happening, but that after the all, when people would start decolonizing, he would get mad because he's a racist and then start deploying the military to try and keep indigenous people from taking back the land, which causes more net violence after the all happens in building a singular deep water port, especially since they conceded that extinction, since Russian war would cause extinction, which means that there's also bigger things for them to overcome than the affirmative. It doesn't solve the app because Russia is not caused by colonialism, which means that the impact will happen outside of the world of it. They also conceded no subjectivity shifts, that religion, family, and friends are other factors, which means that even if you think our education is bad, it doesn't matter. The DCI. Actually, offshore winds conceded there's no warming impact. That also answers deforestation. The DCI. Venezuela definitely counts. The capture of Maduro did not happen in minutes. It happened over a ton of months when the U.S. built up a bunch of ships around Venezuela. That happened for months. We've been pivoting away from Asia for months, which means it's definitely counts.
311. Start now.
Where'd mine go?
I'll give it to you later. I don't want to get up right now.
No, it's all good. Or, it's gonna be the Asia pivot disadvantage to the deterrence advantage. Or to the Asia pivot counter.
I'm good.
Cool. Everyone ready to go? Sweet.
Taiwan war automatically outweighs the only dropped impact in today's debate. Was we say you think there's a small chance the affirmative doesn't trade off with the link limit, and you automatically must vote for a negative on the Taiwan war impact. First, let's did that. The Balkan 25 evidence talked about how creating the perception of an uncredible commitment. It triggers Taiwanese invasion. This means it escalates to only nuclear conflict. As for the stars and SACS 1210 for triggers out introns nuclear powers, and it causes nuclear fallout to cover the Earth, causing total human extinction. It's the same order work on why Russia's nuclear war causing extinction. Also applies to a nuclear war with China because the orders things apply, and it's the only dropped impact in today's space, so you must evaluate any risk of that as 100%. Now, there's a biggest framing issue. They got to this game with only the CPU with only 21 seconds left, which means they only take in one argument at 2 AR, and that's Venezuela thumper. But we're going to answer that right now. First off, the counterplan solves by withdrawing all of our forces from Venezuela. That ensures we're able to pivot to Asia, but only if we don't get entrapped in new theaters like the Arctic. Second off, on the Venezuela thumper, they haven't provided you any evidence on that, so don't mean that it's all arguments are supported by that. Second off, all of our unique evidence postdates the IPDF from evidence from 4 days ago. Postdates any capture of that by meaning that we're still pivoting to China post the action of what's happening right now in status quo. So that means that even after the capture of Maduro, we're still actively moving on right now. So there is movement in order to do that. The free Maduro operation was small. In order for the link to be triggered to the you have to have a larger commitment to another theater. But a Maduro commitment was the raid lasted 6 minutes, and the force components were so. And 4, the force components were limited. They weren't that many ships, and they came from Europe rather than the Indo-Pacific, which means that it doesn't happen right now because we haven't pivoted away from the Indo-Pacific. The only scenario in which we do that, so if we could commit to the Arctic rather than that. Now on the link proper, the affirmative is a broader shift, is transfer resources away from the Indo-Pacific into the Arctic. This means that the Maduro thing was small and 1 year, but the affirmative is a longer commitment to move our ships up to that 1 AC from the entire debate. They talk about how we're going to have an increased force positioning in the Arctic. Every ship that we have in the Arctic is a ship that's not in the Indo-Pacific and able to actively deter China from escalating from this conflicts. And apparently the second link is funding. The Cauldron 25 talks about how every funding trades off, so we're allocating more funding towards that for every single stage of the development of a corp. That's more money we're unable to do for coordinators and other logisticians, as well as just the brute naval force posture that's capable to deter China in that automatically outweighs, because it means that if we shift our forces, as well as we have we tell China that we're committing to new theaters, that means that escalation to that, because we take resources out of the Indo-Pacific, and then you must evaluate the link as 100%. Hold the line. I don't get a free NR, so I don't get an answer to any of their other arguments. So you shouldn't be giving them anything new, because that stands back and there's the best offense and creates late regulates for bad for education. And independently, the Balkan 25 means that an uncredible commitment causes invasion. So the broader political project of shifting and deterring in the Arctic means that it causes further escalation by making it impossible to deter in both theaters. Then extend the warrant on the Cauldron 23 that they dropped to the other states in the Arctic are able to deter Russia right now. So it doesn't matter, even if the affirmative, it doesn't need to have sovereignty, because Canada and the Nordics are able to imminently deter Russia by increasing their own spending anyway. So the affirmative is irrelevant because other adversary states solve right now. Did you also, Alan, the Venezuela thumper is even carded?
Yeah, it's not carded, so you're going to not be evaluating it. It's just an analytics. So we've provided evidence that the commitment to the Indo-Pacific is very high right now. They don't get any other arguments because they didn't extend them, but the turn which I solves the Indo-Pacific is wrong, because that's why Cauldron 23 was by saying that every force commitment, every ship we have in the Arctic still we don't have in Indo-Pacific, which means that we're not unable to deter that. The other thumpers are irrelevant because we're showing it because we have the most recent evidence on how we're dedicatedly shifting there, and every Arctic deployment in the past has been small and limited, regardless of the larger operation that we're going to need to do in order to deter Russia from deterrence. Extend the Peterson and this impact. Russia is not revisionist. So extend the Peterson in 1724. They pursue a rules-based order in the Arctic, pursue things like the EEZ make them unimaginably wealthy. If they're able to not start wars and they're able to create large amounts of wealth through new trade routes to go for there, which makes them able to really possible. That means they have an incentive to not start conflict because independently they concede that Phillips 25 was considered a defensive realist, but by saying that they only will escalate in response to that. As soon as they win their revisionist claims, the only scenario for escalation is in response to the affirmative. Now we're going to counter-explain every single thing. First off, the argument it says that it's rhetoric about other groups for hawkish officials, but first off, Putin doesn't listen to these groups and don't matter. And second off, these groups are talking in the context of defense. If the West is something aggressive, what would they do in reaction to this? They say that they're doing it in anything we use our port infrastructure to design in order to increase for a new trade routes. They're not aggressive in reactions. They say documents, but these documents are what would happen if you're doing something in reaction to Western things, not proactive first source. They say they have new capacities below war, but these are active in the European threshold, European theater, not the Arctic. So we haven't provided any evidence on why Putin's revisions in the Arctic, specifically where it says that in the Arctic he's going to be chill because he wants to be super rich and easy. Then they say he's expanding right now to provide evidence on how that's defense. They say that he wants to look non-threatening, but all of our evidence is credible, and we counter-explain all our examples, which means that Russia's not revisions in one time.
We have 3 subs.
3:45.
Starting out.
I'm putting together a solution. Not a solution, sorry. Disclosure, resolution. reasons you're voting after day. One, they literally dropped the US-Russia war causes extinction. And second, the revision of magnifies the impact by 1,000 times. They dropped the ideology claim in the 1AR about how their evidence is propaganda in the first place. So you should distrust every word they made in the 2NR. That was in the 1AR explicitly and was conceded. Three, even if they're right about the DA, they went for a perception leak, which means that Venezuela definitely dumps it now because you know for a fact that there's uncommitment when the US shifted towards Venezuela instead of Indo-Pacific, which definitely dumps it. Dropping the impact means we need to run a 1% risk that Russia is somewhat revisionist in it, that would cause a US-Russia war, which definitely outweighs. That's the Manzan evidence, which would concede it. It talks about one, there's enough blacks, it creates so much black soot in the atmosphere, blocking out all the sunlight, causing deaths of all crops and all humanity die. And I'll extend some of the revisionism stuff. One, they draw specific words how Russia's modernizing right now. SSBNs, Poseidon, nuclear ASATs, and other technology like that all prove it. And two, we did not drop the claim about how Russia's defensive realist. This is wrong. We cited internal documents which prove this is false. That was, we cited this in the 1AR. It's specific about how high Russian elites talk about, like Khrushchev, for example, talk about how we need to frame nuclear weapons as immoral to allow them to use it in a war and conflict. Other way around. Wait.
Not using nuclear weapons.
Not using nuclear weapons. And that means these documents these documents don't happen for a fact of provocation. That is wrong. They happened before the U.S. was even going into the Arctic. This was happening before, and they wanted to attack the U.S. before. And three, I'm going to say some of the claims about how they view security as zero-sum and hawkish towards the U.S. in the first place. This was all this is true because that was the evidence. Only we have indicted their actual ideology of Russians. They are reading evidence that are perceiving Russians. We are reading evidence from leaked internal documents from Russia, highly specialized elites that influence Putin. And even if you think we are wrong on all these, they conceded the claim that their evidence is propaganda in the 2NR. So you know for a fact that all their evidence is propaganda. You should not be willing to vote on it at all. And also they didn't do any of the case turn stuff, so I'm going to do some of the case turn here. In the nuclear war even if we drop the impact on Taiwan war, US-Russia war, they equally dropped US-Russia war causing extinction, which definitely outweighs one magnitude. It guarantees collapse. The US-Russia war would lead to millions of nuclear weapons being launched, black soot covers the atmosphere. And two, time frame, explosions happened immediately, causing deaths of millions of people. And three, Turns case, they didn't even make an argument about Turns case on how Taiwan war turns US-Russia war. So you have to agree with what I'm saying right now. US-Russia war definitely turns case. It would ignite other hotspots in different areas, causing Taiwan war to spark as another. The 2NR is a bunch of assertions about how all of our examples are defensive. That's wrong. Russian documents have plans to strike NATO countries which were not provoked. And Putin isn't chill in the Arctic. He's building Arctic bases, increasing subs there. That's the Vinloon evidence. That app is uniquely key to solve because it builds a deep water port known by dredging it. That's the Humber evidence, which allows for a sustainable area for ice, which allows for sustainable icebreakers, to power project in the Arctic, which revitalizes the Coast Guard. That's the PICAS evidence, and they're uniquely key because they are the only ones that can serve a form as integrated deterrence between the DoD and the DOH, which counters Russia, which is conceded. So you know we definitely solved. It's try or die. You access the entire advantage from this because they conceded the impact. And next, go to the DA. Bro, can you pass me back up?
Yeah.
Here.
They said on case that other states will solve it.
Oh yeah. Also, they said other states. Yeah, I'll answer this here. They said other states can solve. That is wrong. They dropped that the Coast Guard is uniquely key because they are the ones that can do integrated deterrence. That's the PICAS evidence which would conceded. Okay. And next, the DA is definitely thumped. The U.S. increased their military capabilities in Venezuela for months before capturing Mandara, which should have triggered the DA on both the perception and material link, because the U.S. is visibly starting seizing ships and oil tanks. This is definitely impact defense. It should have happened in the scope. The argument that the 1NR made is that there was capturing him was covert and happened in a matter of minutes, which isn't true. Capturing him, first there's military buildup for months around Venezuela, capturing oil ships and other things like that. That was gradual and very public. The U.S. sent the largest military aircraft carrier that we had to the area. It's thousands of troops there for weeks. That definitely means the DA is stumped. Here's each argument. First is that counterplan solved. That's incoherent. Uniqueness counterplan can't solve with thumper. Second is that there's no evidence, which doesn't mean these claims aren't true. You know for a fact there's a military buildup in Venezuela before we captured Maduro. And third is there uniqueness evidence post-states it. That is wrong. Even if we win, the U.S. is focused in the Indo-Pacific right now. A few weeks ago they were not, which disproves the impact. And it also stumps the funding leak. The U.S. has spent a lot of money to maintain a military presence in Venezuela. That builds a deep water port and no. And Russia definitely outweighs. I did that work on case. They went for a perception link in the 2NR, which means that the perception of us shifting to Venezuela, even for a moment, should have caused the impact to happen. They went for that link. And the US search for more outlets.
Good wait, right.
Good one. Let's go. Let's see.
Oh my gosh, it did.